Greetings, Deep Dive Podcast listeners. This is your boy, Sam Oram, coming at you with another episode of the Deep Dive Podcast. I hope everybody is doing great so far. The first quarter of the year is over. We have started the second quarter of the year, and things are getting more and more exciting for all of us who are part of the Deep Dive Podcast family. So, thank you all for tuning in. There are people who are logging in from all over the world, and I certainly want to thank you for joining us here on the Deep Dive Podcast. We've been having a great time in season three, empowering people, and it's just exciting. But for those of you who are new, welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast. I appreciate your support. For everyone, I want you to continue to like, subscribe, download, and share. It means a lot to our audience. It means a lot to the continuous growth for the Deep Dive Podcast. So we're excited, man. And tonight is just another opportunity for us to empower some people. I think I mentioned to you guys that a lot of the topics that I select have been selecting recently have come from people who are part of our Facebook group. I wanted to keep that interactive and make sure that we're touching on things that people are interested in and things that also can empower people or things that they can tangibly use in their lives. And tonight's episode is no different. Tonight's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about understanding depression. There are a lot of different ways and variations of what depression is and how people perceive depression. And I want to be able to just kind of shed a little light on what I believe can help people in the short term and long term in terms of recognizing and understanding depression, but then also being able to counteract that with certain types of treatment, whether there is physical treatment, mental treatment, or whatever the case may be. I would want to give a caveat that I'm not giving you this information from a perspective of an expert. I'm not giving you clinical advice. You want to, seek medical attention for clinical advice. But I did want to give you just some things that I have learned over the years, or studied, or observed, or even conversed with other people who have gone through bouts of depression, and just sharing what that is, what it looks like, and just again understanding depression and is very, very important. The thing about depression, it can manifest itself in so many ways, and different people have different forms of depression. So we have to be able to recognize that. And I think I wanted people to one of the messages I wanted to get out to everybody tonight is, you want to be able to understand depression, not just, if it's affecting you, but it may be affecting someone around you, a coworker, a family member, or whatever the case may be. When we put this topic up, people may say, well, I don't have depression. Why would I listen to this particular podcast? Well, it's not so much about you in a lot of cases. It could be about someone that you love and that's important, or someone that may not have a personal relationship with, but you may see some of these signs and symptoms that are very important when it comes to depression. So I want to give you some common signs, some things that you can look for, and I also want to, again, as a caveat, say that these things may apply to other scenarios in your life as well. Just because these things I'm going to talk about, part of depression doesn't mean you're depressed. You may have some of the same symptoms, but what will happen is if you see most of these symptoms or most of these scenarios and then it lasts for a period of time, that may be time for you to consult a medical professional to get some help because it can get very, very serious. One of the things that is a sign, a common sign of people who are depressed, they typically feel sad. They feel sad, they feel empty, and it's a persistent feeling of sadness or feeling empty. If you or anybody else that just kind of seems sad, and then for no reason, it's like, why are you sad? And there is no reason. That could be one of the symptoms or signs of depression, or some people lose enthusiasm for things that they have previously been interested in, like hobbies or different type of activities. Let's just say you're an avid golfer and you just lose interest all of a sudden in golfing or playing tennis or video games or reading or whatever your hobby may be or that activity may be, and you were passionate about it at some point, and then you all of a sudden lost interest in that particular activity or that particular hobby. That could easily be a sign of depression. Something else that's important to understand, whether some people have a change in appetite. Some people may eat more, some people may eat less, some people may lose weight, some people may gain weight. Here's something interesting for me. I don't know if I would say I suffer from depression or anything like that. I really don't think so, but there are times where I get so frustrated with something, right? Whatever it may be, then I'll start to do something that I typically wouldn't do, like eat late at night. Like eat late at night, because I try to have a cutoff time at night in terms of when I eat, right? Because you sleep better and all these other things. But then certain times it's like, again, I don't want to go so far as to say I'm depressed, but I might be frustrated about something that just, you know what, I'm just gonna sit my fat self in this bed and I'm gonna eat these potato chips. I don't care that it's 10 o'clock. I don't care that it's midnight. And I just throw all caution to the wind at that particular moment because I just don't care. My thing is not losing weight and not having an appetite. Mine is the opposite. It's like, look, I'm gonna eat everything. I'm gonna eat sweets. I'm gonna eat everything I'm not supposed to eat, and I'm gonna eat it at the time I'm not supposed to eat it because I just am. Right? Now, again, I'm not saying that, from my standpoint, that's depression, but I can actually see how, that being one of the symptoms where people will either just start to overindulge in food or they may lose their appetite altogether and start to lose weight. Both of those could be signs of depression. Some people have insomnia, which means they just cannot fall asleep. They just up all night and thinking or whatever, and they just cannot fall asleep. But contrary to that, some people sleep all day if they're depressed. They may, wake up and, get up and do what they got to do, and then they get back in the bed or lay around, and then they just sleep, 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 sleep. That could be a symptom as well. So again, you want to make sure you're recognizing these things in individuals. And like I said, no one thing would apply in terms of being depressed, in my opinion. Not one thing, but when you start to add these things up and then you start to notice these behaviors, then there may be, one of those things that'll give you one reason to pause and to either ask questions, inquire, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes when people are depressed, they feel fatigue or lack of energy. They just don't want to do anything. They don't have any sense of, I really want to just go out and attack the world. It's not like that in a lot of cases when you're depressed. Here's something that it really bothers me from people who, I mean, when I say it bothers me, it saddens me, I should say. A lot of people who are depressed, they have feelings of worthlessness. They just feel worthless, or they have some type of guilt, self guilt. That really saddens me because when people have gotten to a point where they legitimately feel worthless, then now it becomes kind of dangerous. Because if you're thinking about this, you feel worthless, you start to have that why am I here question, right? And if you start to have that why am I here question, then your mindset is on the verge of going somewhere where you really don't want it to go. I've said this on numerous podcast episodes in the past, and I know this to be 100% true clinically. But when you ask yourself a question, your mind has to seek an answer. It just has to seek an answer. And so controlling the questions that you ask yourself are very important. Well, if you ask yourself, why am I here? Why do I even exist? You're treading down a path that you may not want to go as it relates to depression, because now you're starting to get into an area where, you know, you're asking yourself questions that may continue to perpetuate scenarios in your life that you don't want. Right. I'm just trying to put this as delicately as I can. But yeah, you don't want to ask yourself those questions. You want to ask yourself of a positive type question. In other words, what do I need to do to stop feeling this way? Remember, the mind has to seek an answer. It doesn't matter which way you go. And the questions that you ask are very, very important. So that feeling of worthlessness, you don't ever want to ask yourself, why am I here? Every single person God created with a purpose in mind. Every single person. There is a purpose for us all. And so the question, why are you here? It is to question, God giving you the gift of life. Now, what you can ask yourself is, what is my purpose for being here? That's a totally different thing than saying, why am I here? Now you're questioning your existence. But if you ask yourself, what is my purpose for being here? Now you're asking yourself the question of what you need to do to fulfill that purpose. Very, very important to be able to make that distinction. Sometimes when people get depressed or they're in a depressive state, they have difficulty concentrating. They have difficulty making decisions or even remembering things. And again, we have to take all of these symptoms in a vacuum from a standpoint of making sure that we're not trying to self-diagnose. But if we have all of these symptoms, then we want to seek professional help, because, a lack of concentration or decision making or remembering things, that could also be early forms of dementia, Alzheimer's. It could be something else, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's depression. So you don't want to self-diagnose, but you want to recognize. Remember, the topic is understanding depression. And so it would at least or should provoke you to get some type of professional help, in terms of really someone who understands and can help you diagnose and differentiate between what may be depression or just a phase, or, dementia, Alzheimer's, something. It could be anything. But you don't want to make that decision. You do want to be aware, though, of what these things may be. There may be some physical symptoms that, are symptoms of depression, like, for example, headaches. Headaches are a symptom of depression. But again, remember what I'm saying, and I keep saying this over and over because I don't want people to take this everything face value. Because as you all know, a headache could be a symptom for 1,000 different things. Some of them could be just as simple as you not eating. So you don't want to say, "Oh, because I got a headache, oh, I'm depressed." No, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. I mean, you may need to get some food or drink some water, so those type things. But it is one of the symptoms of depression, and also body aches. One would think, okay, I'm having body aches. What does that have to do with depression? I do want you to understand this. A form of depression is also a chemical imbalance. There are chemicals that are involved when you start talking about, getting into a more advanced stages, whether it's bipolar or, some type of mental illness or things of that nature. In a lot of cases, there are some chemical imbalances that are involved. Well, when you're talking about chemical imbalances, then, obviously it can affect your body physically. It can affect your body in terms of body aches, headaches, and things of that nature. So that's just a part of it as well. Do you see how all of this is kind of tying in? But it's important to note all of these things. And again, when you're looking at somebody else, even if it's not you, and you're recognizing these symptoms, somebody just all of a sudden laying around sleeping all day, or just, eating all the time where they typically would not, all these other kind of things. If they're restless or agitated, that's a sign of depression. You're restless a lot, you're agitated, like every little thing gets on your nerves, right? Then could be a sign of depression. And I know I keep saying this over and over, so y'all forgive me, but I'm not saying that alone is means you're depressed. I'm not saying that I get agitated about something every I get agitated about something every single day. So that don't mean I'm depressed. Something agitates me every single day, especially something, in terms of, I call it stupidity. And I don't mean like somebody is stupid. I mean, you may make a call to a business, doing some type of business, and they just may do something or say something that just doesn't make common sense. And that agitates me. It's like, why would you even ask something like that? It it defies logic, right? So I get agitated. But that doesn't mean I'm depressed. That doesn't mean I'm depressed. That just means I'm agitated. But when you start to total up all of these different symptoms, you really want to seek help, because, at the end of the day, what will start to happen is this. If you have most of these symptoms, when you're talking about being agitated or restless, insomnia, or just sleeping more, or fatigue, guilt, worthlessness, all of these things, right? If you start to have all of these symptoms, then if left untreated, what'll probably happen, what typically happens, I should say, you start to have now recurring thoughts of death, or something even worse, recurring thoughts of suicide. I saw a statistic somewhere that says 90%, I think it was about 90% of suicides are mental illness related. Now we know that, right? We could logically deduce that, but here's the thing. Of that 90% of the people who commit suicide, I don't remember the exact percentage of those individuals, but most of those people had symptoms of depression, which means there are a lot of people who are suffering from depression. Ultimately, those recurring thoughts lead to suicide. And you certainly want to be able to recognize and acknowledge that. That's so very important. Even if it doesn't go to the point of suicide, some people, when they're depressed, they just want to die. They just give up. They just give up on life. Lord, take me now, right? You don't want people in that type of situation. Something else I saw just in my preparation for this particular podcast, and it bothered me a lot. It bothered me a lot. I noticed, and I study a lot of stuff, and I studied this topic before. Once the group mentioned I should do this. I didn't know this, but there is a very high number of kids and teenagers that want to either die or kill themselves because they are depressed. They are depressed. But their level of depression, I want y'all to hear this now, their level of depression is a little bit different than a lot of those symptoms that I just shared with you. Their level of depression may be they are being oppressed by a parent, always chastising them or getting on their case or putting them down or dogging them out or working them like a slave or all these other things. And they can't say or do anything about it because they're a kid. So they're oppressed, and that oppression leads to depression. And so it's no different with this kid or this teenager. Then they want to kill themselves, or they just want to die because they don't want to feel oppressed, because that is now depression. because your mother or father is always, putting you down or calling you names or getting on your case or working you like you're a slave. You didn't have a child for that child to be your slave. Go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. And they can't talk back or do anything back, right? The child not your slave, it's your child. And what happens is they feel oppressed because they can't say nothing. And then that oppression goes to depression. On the lighter side of this same topic, let me tell you something. I saw something on tick. I always get it wrong. TikTok, whatever. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And these parents would ask these kids, like, I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was one of those reels, and it said something to the effect of, so what did you say about me when I walked out of the room? Like the parent was getting on the child, and the parent came back and said, so what is it that you said about me when I walked out of the room? And they said, it's okay, you can, you can cuss if you want to cuss, you can cuss. Just tell me what you said. You cuss this one time, just let me know what you said. And I've seen multiple reels where these kids they were just like, they were going off on the parents. When the parents walked out of the room, they were cussing, they were, they were using the MF words and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm saying to myself, what? But here, I wouldn't dare, as much as I have a flip mouth sometimes, I wouldn't dare even think about saying something crazy to my mom when I was growing up, not let alone saying it. I wouldn't even think it because I'm thinking she might read my mind and come beat my butt. Right. But here's the serious part of that. If a child feels compelled to cuss you out as their parent when you walk out of the room because of how you make them feel, you could be on the verge of oppressing your child to the point of depression. And that depression can lead to suicide or wanting to just be dead or run away, or, the best scenario for them, can't wait till they turn 18 so they can leave your house. You got to be careful with that stuff, guys, because, and again, I didn't know all of these statistics until I studied this topic, but there are more kids that commit suicide or at least want to die or commit suicide than you can even imagine, because, again, they feel oppressed, which leads to depression, and they can't do anything about it. They can't talk back to the parents. There's no outlet for them. You know what I mean? So they just suck it up, and then it just leads to something bad. And then by the time you know it, the kid kills themselves, and now you're all wondering, oh, what's going on? And you're doing all these crazy things, wondering what happened. What happened was you. Be very, very careful on that. I've always been of the mindset, especially with kids, is you always want to praise them even when they come up short or whatever it is, praise progress. Don't ever continuously tell your kid, no, 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 don't. You do it in a manner where you're educating and showing them why you don't want them to touch the hot stove, as opposed to just saying no, 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 or spanking them or any of those other kind of things. I know a lot of parents, they're into the timeout stuff. We didn't grow up like that. Ain't no such thing as timeout. Timeout was you go and get that switch so I can beat your butt. But however you discipline your child, you want to do it in a manner that you're not oppressing that child. You always want to uplift that child, keep that child uplifted, and even in the form of discipline, you want to do it with love, not with anger and those type things, because you're affecting a child more than you can even imagine. So anyway, as I start to close out this particular topic, I do want you to realize, just kind of summing up everything that I talked about, just experiencing, once again, one or more of these symptoms doesn't necessarily mean that you're depressed or suffering from depression. But if these symptoms, whether it's in you or someone else, if they persist, then you absolutely want to seek medical attention. If they persist for, let's say, more than a couple of weeks, then you definitely want to seek some medical attention, especially if these things start to affect someone's ability to function in their daily lives. You're at your job and you're just not as effective. You're doing your family duties, whatever that may be. You find yourself, let's say, cooking a meal, and all of a sudden you put too much salt or you burnt something, you're distracted, right? And this goes on for a couple of weeks. You want to seek professional help. It may not be depression, it may not be anything. It may just mean you can't cook. But I'm just kind of making light of the situation because this is a very deep situation, but it is serious. But if it persists over a couple of weeks, at least get some type of professional help. And you would want to be on the side of them saying, "Oh, we don't see anything wrong. It just may be a whatever, whatever, whatever." I'd rather you do that than to go through and allow it to manifest itself, especially men, man. I don't know. We got to do something about us fellas, and I include myself in this as well, because we get to the point where we don't like to share our thoughts. We don't like to cry. We don't like to feel any kind of, thing that make us seem weak or dependent upon something else. We kind of have to get out of that particular mindset, um, because we have too many people, especially men in the Black community, that suffer in silence. And in a lot of cases, there's no need. There's no need. And I'm as guilty as anybody else. I don't. I can count on two or three fingers the number of people that I may just totally allow myself to be vulnerable with or to or around or whatever the case may be. All the other times is me just being, just sucking it up and doing what I need to do. I don't show vulnerability because of the things that I do. I have to show strength. But let me just say that even for myself, being vulnerable or showing vulnerability is strength. In fact, it's the opposite if you don't. It's a weakness to not show your vulnerabilities. It is a lack. I'll tell you about that more in another podcast, but just guys, don't suffer in pain and silence. Everybody needs that. This is in my book, The Mindset of a Champion, but everybody needs that person that they could go to and talk about anything without judgment, without anything. I mean, everybody, I'm telling you, everybody needs that person. If you don't have that person, you're lacking a quality of life. Everybody needs that person, right? I don't care what you do, you need that person. You can come up to me and say you killed somebody. Well, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this, but everybody need that person that you can talk about with anything and not have judgment, right? So that's a part of not falling into that sense of depression. And again, if you have all of these things, you want to seek professional help, especially if it lasts over a couple of weeks. So recognizing this stuff is crucial. It's just crucial. It's crucial. It affects your physical being, your physical health, your relationships. A lot of times, think about this: your marriage, your relationships, they can suffer greatly because one of the people are, in a depressive state. And then a lot of times your spouse may be trying to help you get out of this situation, and you don't even want the help because you don't even acknowledge or recognize that you need the help. So you have to be able to recognize those type things. And again, left untreated, this stuff can lead to even more severe mental health issues. So you don't want to leave it untreated. And most people who commit suicide, it could have been prevented if there was some intervention along the path of their thoughts from the beginning of depression all the way through the point where, you know what, I want to end my life. Had there been some type of intervention along that spectrum, then that person may not have committed suicide. So you definitely want to make sure you understand and recognize that sometimes when you're talking about treatment for depression, that treatment can be highly effective, guys. It can be highly effective. Think about that. When you're talking about going through all of these things that I just talked about, and it can be treated, effectively, you don't have to go through all of these things. The key is the earlier it's acknowledged and recognized, the better chances you have of recovery. But the treatments are very, very effective. I won't get into what the treatments are because I don't, want to be, there are a lot of people who are here all over the world, and I don't want to be legally responsible for certain things that I say, but I will tell you that it is highly treatable. So you want to do your due diligence in terms of finding out what that is, but most importantly, you want to seek professional help because you may be suffering and don't need to suffer. Okay. But being able to recognize depression in yourself or someone that you love, you know, even to talk about it, it can reduce the stigma. And this is another big part of it. People feel that there's some type of stigma surrounding mental health and mental illness. Guys, again, we got to get out of that stuff. Where did that even come from? We can't be of the thought that, it's a stigma associated with talking about mental health. It's no different than any other illness. You could get the flu, or you got some type of bug or stomach ache, whatever. It's an illness. You can't control it. You think people want to be depressed? No, they can't control it in a lot of cases. But by understanding that, depression is a medical condition that requires treatment, then individuals can seek that treatment without feeling ashamed or feeling that stigma or embarrassed and all that other kind of stuff. And I would tell you, just, if you feel a stigma, or if you feel embarrassed about it, then, how could I say this? Well, I'll just say try not to allow other people's opinion affect your life. Try to not allow how other people may think of you or feel about you affect your life. And I literally mean your life. Do what you have to do for yourself. Self-love is the most important love. It's the self-love is the most important thing. So, worrying about what your friends or your neighbor or your buddies or your boys or your friends or your girlfriends, worrying about what they think. Who cares what they think? Remember what I said before. You buy somebody's opinion, you buy their lifestyle. And I ain't trying to live like some of these people. I'm trying to always live a quality of life, keeping God first and living a quality of a physical life. I ain't trying to do all this other stuff, right? So don't worry about the stigma. Don't worry about being embarrassed. Don't worry about what other people are going to say. Get treatment. Do what you have to do. So as I close out, guys, overall, bottom line is this: recognizing depression, it's just essential. It is essential for promoting good mental health. It is essential for promoting your well-being. It is essential for reducing the risk of suicide, which is the most important thing. And it's essential for improving the quality of life for you or the individuals who you care about or people who are around you. Those things are super important, guys. And I want everybody to really take this seriously and understand that this topic is a serious topic and we got to treat it as such. I strongly encourage you. There are a lot of people who are on this particular episode, but there are a lot of people who are not. If there's any episode that you should like, share, download, and subscribe to, mainly share, is this particular episode. Even if there's somebody that you kind of think they're suffering from depression, but you don't want to get into that conversation with them, and you should, but you may not want to. Just kind of lightly say, hey, look, I got 2 or 3 podcasts from this guy that I want you to listen to. You don't even have to just give them this podcast alone because it may seem a bit obvious, but shoot them 2 or 3 episodes, the link to 2 or 3 episodes, and include this episode. And like I got a lot of mileage from these 3 episodes of the podcast, and hopefully they'll at least listen to this episode and maybe recognize some of the symptoms that they have in the form of depression. I know I made light of certain parts of this podcast, but at the end of the day, this is nothing to make light of. This is not a funny topic. It is very, very serious. People are suffering in silence, and we want to make sure that we do all that we can do to continue to keep people uplifted, empowered, and inspired. So again, I thank everybody for joining me on this week's episode of the Deep Dive Podcast. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, download, and share. Go to the website, the Deep Dive Podcast.live. There are a ton of episodes there. Go back and listen to some of the previous episodes from seasons 1 and 2, and even earlier season 3, and share those episodes with people that need empowerment. With that, I thank you all for joining me on this episode. God bless you, and I'll see you on the beaches of the world.